Welcome to this episode of The Courageous Choice. I'm really excited because today we're talking about the truth, the real truth, the kind that leaders tend to tiptoe around because it either feels risky or uncomfortable. And who better to have as my guest today than my friend Jackson Lynch? Jackson is the founder of Talent Sherpa. It's a leading platform of pragmatic talent strategy. And through his best-selling Substack newsletter, podcast, and executive coaching, he equips senior leaders with the tools to maximize business outcomes through people. He's served for over 12 years as a CHRO, and he also coaches up-and-coming CHROs on their journey to becoming authentic leaders. Today, we're going to dive straight into it. We're talking about transparency, directness, and why leaders need the courage to say what's real. So, Jackson, let's jump right in if you're willing.
Bring it. Let's do it. So glad to be here.
Thanks for being with us. I'm really excited. Every time we get together, our conversations not only make us laugh, but challenge me to think about how and why we do the things we do. And I'm excited for our listeners to hear all about it. So you often say that leaders avoid the real conversation by circling around the thing around the thing. Um, when I think about that, there's a lot of cost with that on culture and results. And when executives just won't name the thing and say it out loud, what's the cost of that from your perspective?
Yeah, I love the first question. I think the cost is never about the conflict itself, although that's normally where people will lean into. It's the cost is in the confusion that gets created as a result of avoiding the thing behind the thing. So and that cost compounds, right? The silence becomes the operating system instead of the clarity. And if you have clarity, nothing but good things come from that. Might be uncomfortable, but nothing but good things come. But if you don't talk about it, then there's a gap. And you know what fills the gap? Politics, mediocrity, all the bad things. So I think it's all about the confusion is really what the cost is.
Yeah, when we think about what people need today to navigate the amount of change that organizations are facing, they're looking for that clarity. And to your point, when there isn't information, they're going to fill the gaps with like the politics or their imaginations, which often are worse than whatever the reality might actually be.
Oh, yeah, no, they always are. In fact, I was doing a major M&A activity. We bought Kraft Pizza. I was leading Nestle direct store delivery at the time. And one of our change principles were we would not only answer hard questions, we would come up with the hardest questions we wouldn't want to answer and answer those too. And the principle behind it, to your very point, was how do you keep people from worrying about the boogeyman? What's almost always it's going to be worse than what is in reality. And that allowed us to sometimes say, guys, we don't know yet. And when we do know, you'll hear it from us. And when you hear it from us, it'll be the unvarnished truth. And as a result of that, we can all make, adult decisions, right? But by not actually leaning into that discomfort, it becomes really, really challenging. And the reason I'm so passionate about the subject, and sorry, I've already gone on my TED Talk already, it feels like.
I love it.
I get juice talking about this, is high performers audit your culture every day. And by the way, if you ever want to know what your culture is, audit your last 100 decisions. Why'd you make them? Who was involved? What are the trade-offs that you made? What are the stickiness of the outcomes? All of that is your culture. It's not what's up on the wall. When high performers are auditing your culture and they see a gap between what you say and what you do, that gives them agency to say, I'm going to go do something else. And that talent density, which ultimately is, in my view, the most important measure for us to be driving towards, it collapses in that ambiguity because we don't say what we need to say. And I guess I would just say that when the truth becomes off limits, either intentionally or because we're just uncomfortable sharing what is real, the culture turns into performance art. It's not real. It's not an operating system. It doesn't drive the outcomes that you want. And ultimately, performance suffers as a result of it.
A couple things came out to me as you spoke about that. I think that, high performers, that trust that gets eroded, and if there is that gap between what we say and what we do, sometimes as leaders or leadership teams, we don't even know we're spinning, right? We it's become so natural. You don't even, it's like not intentional. You think we're saying it, but we like, how are we going to say this? Well, what if you just said it, right? What if, and I think that, so there's kind of two things. There's that erosion of trust, which is like just critical because I think people, if they don't see that alignment, they're not going to stay. But can you talk more about this concept of talent density and share a little bit more about what you mean?
Yeah, before I do, let me double click on something you said that resonates with me. Here's the reality. Most of your top performers already know the truth before you say it, right? When you've been in organizations, you have a good, BS detector. You know when you're being spun, and people end up leaning towards kind of comfort because I want to spare your concerns, and you've traded clarity for comfort, and that has a direct impact on business performance. And we say we do it for them, we're actually doing it for us. As and when we do, they already know what we're trying not to tell them in most cases. We are, as human beings, so resilient. We need to lift up and treat people with the adults and the agency that humanity demands. And when we do that, you'll be surprised at how well people will respond. So let me come back to your talent emergency. Really simple concept. And you can execute it in a hard way or a simple way. Let me maybe lean it on the simple. There are probably 5 to 10% of any job in any organization that has an outsized impact on business performance. As human capital leaders, we need to know what those jobs are. They're not the ones at the top of the org chart. The guy that kind of came up with a pivotal role strategy, guy named John Boudreau, that I know you know quite well. He did it at Disney, and his identification of one of the most critical roles was the street sweeper, because although it doesn't appear to be the most important, it is one of the most important for the experience when you're in the parks. They figure out what to do with the kids that are crying. They help the family that is a little overwhelmed with everything find the place in the shade. They help people get lost when the kids get separated. They're the ones that are connected. And almost as important as all of those, they keep everything clean. And in the mind of the guest, cleanliness is safety, which is one of their critical deliverables, right? So they over-rotated on, how do I select for these people? How do I pay these people? How do I train these people? And if they had $10 and 10 people, they would take $8 and apply it towards the street sweepers. As companies, we need to do that very same thing. So once you have those roles, the question is, what are those outcomes for the roles? And I would argue there are 5 to 7 of them that if they did those things and only those things, they would be seen as an A player. So think about it broadly of, are they in the top 25% of the available talent that you could get to deliver those outcomes for what you're willing to pay? And now divide those people against those roles, divided by the total number of people and the total number of those roles. And if I have 3 A players and 7 everything else, then I have a 30% talent density. Now that gives me something I can measure as we move forward. And it's one of the only predictive impacts that in human capital that we can measure. Everything else is looking at the rearview mirror. So the talent density idea is, I need to have my most important roles filled with people who are uniquely skilled at delivering those. If I don't have people as A players in those roles, I should look to reallocate them towards parts of the organization where they can be an A player. But I cannot accept mediocrity, because I'm going to have under-delivered performance. If you believe, as I do, that you are the average of the 10 people that you spend the most time with, that has a direct impact. If I have lower talent density, I'm going to have lower average performance than if I have higher talent density. And there's all sorts of other research that would support that as being true. And then ultimately, if you believe, as I do, A players are always auditing your culture, the things that connect to them is the ability to focus on outcomes, not tasks, the ability to feel purpose, connection to the work, and the ability to be operational in a independent and meaningful way. Talent density drives all of that stuff. Most things we measure don't. So that's talent density.
I love that, and it brought up so many important things, and I also hate mediocrity. It's just like we need to get that out. I so many times see in organizations where we've just accepted lower standards than we need to. How do you think, I'm thinking about how do companies calibrate that new definition of those A players when you think about like the overlay of AI and how work is getting done? It almost feels like it needs to be a continuous process in addition to the equation.
Well, it's interesting because most people will say an A player and they connect it to the individual unrelated to the role. And so let me underscore really important point. I'm sure you can find a whole bunch of CEOs that might disagree, but I think most of them would say I was an A player CHRO. I would be an F in marketing. So it's not the individual, it is the individual relative to the outcome. So the question around calibration is all about how do I find a way to be really direct and clear in the 5 to 7 outcomes that matter for that job to be successful. If I do, then I have the ability to look at pattern recognition in individuals and say, how many of those do I feel comfortable that they will consistently deliver now? And if I'm not comfortable, where are the gaps that we need to close to be able to make up the difference? And if sometimes those gaps are things we can teach quickly. If so, great. Now you have a development plan. Sometimes those things are things that are not teachable quickly. Now you need to reallocate, and you find a place where that person can thrive. And oh, by the way, you want to drive engagement? Give everyone the ability to win and feel like they're contributing. It's not posters and perks. It's meaning and purpose. And so I get very excited about the topic. And yet I was was doing a webinar earlier today. 80%, there are 600 or so folks on it. 80% had never heard the term talent density. And oh my goodness, what a miss for the entire function that's not the primary thing at the top of every human capital scorecard.
Yeah. I love how you talk about like just scorecards in general and how we're often measuring the wrong things. It's super important. When I think about how we are really engaging those A players, it is about them wanting to connect. And a lot of companies, almost every company I talk to right now, they're talking about engagement and how do we, performance and productivity and all these things. And it's really about that clarity so that because if you just assume that you have high performers, let's say we have people who want to contribute and are there to contribute, I go, my goal would be if everybody in your organization had an extra 30 minutes in their day, they'd know what to do that would move the needle and be productive. And they'd feel good about doing it, right? You know?
Oh, and if you are talking to them about outcomes, they will use that discretionary effort towards something that will grow the organization exponentially. If you give them a list of tasks, they will just do the same thing until they're done. Which one do you want with your company?
That's the quote of the day. I mean, that's it, right? Like that's the question. So why do you think that it is that some of the smartest executives still really can't just say the simple things or the direct sentence that everyone's waiting for and probably knows anyway?
Well, I think it's because clarity requires some level of vulnerability. And most executives, they learn a lot of things, but they did not learn how to be vulnerable and strong at the same time. And I don't think we do a very good job of teaching people at any part of your life, not even in the work environment, but in college and in families growing up, how to be crystal clear about what your expectations are. What are the outcomes? How do I expect you to behave? Those kind of things. Like, especially if you grew up in kind of a little bit dysfunctional families like I do, all of those wires get really, really crossed. And so you don't know the behavior reaction to the degree that you should. And so maybe that's why, as I've kind of grown in my life, I've overcome some of that stuff. And now I think it's so important. But you know, I think sometimes executives are concerned about protecting feelings. And as I mentioned before, it's not other people's feelings they're worried about. It's their own individual comfort level, right? And when they do that, it just creates confusion. And so even though it's done with probably the best of intentions, the ultimate impact is a performance sabotage that most don't even know that they're doing.
So, if you were coaching, if I was a CEO that really needed coaching in this regard because I kept self sabotaging, what advice would you give me?
Get uncomfortable. If you are if every time you get up in front of your team, whether it is an executive staff meeting or at a town hall across, if you walk away and say that went great, you probably didn't do the work. So in a staff meeting, if you walk out of there saying that went great, chances are you didn't have the debate necessary to be able to debate, decide, and commit. Uh, if you don't get kind of that messiness that allows people to, you know, we throw around the term psychological safety quite a bit. I believe it means to put an uncomfortable truth on the table and still feel like you belong to the team. Like that is an important element of the debate at a senior level. And if you do that and it's not a bit uncomfortable, like I don't think you're at, I don't think it means what you think it means. So to steal from an old movie quote. Um, so I think a lot of it has to do with just executives that want to be comfortable, but performance is not a comfortable feeling, not one that's growing, I don't think.
Yeah, I was talking with a leader recently and saying, you need to almost assign that role. Assign if you, just to start building the muscle so that people get comfortable with being uncomfortable or someone surfacing a challenging debate, right? And start building that muscle. And so if like maybe if you, give me the authority, I feel more comfortable to start leaning in and you can rotate that role just to start practicing it. It sounds silly, at the executive level, hopefully we have developed that muscle a bit, but often, I know that we've we've both been in situations where that's not true. Um,
Well, you can always give it to the general counsel and say, what we need you to do is lean into discomfort and try to be cynical, and see if you can stretch into that. Um, in most of the large kind of integration work processes that I've run, we create red teams, and those red teams are the people that are literally assigned to be the contrarian and the devil's advocate, and it has two benefits from it. Like if you're about ready to launch something, no matter what it is, go to the people who are going to use it and say, "What I need you to do is be the red team. I need you to tell me why it's going to fail." And that has two impacts to it. Number one, you get a long list of things that might cause it to fail, and now you have a work list that you can go after. Number two, it is cathartic to get them to express the feelings that are largely what they're holding on to with whatever change is about ready to hit them. So there's like no downside from doing that well. And if you can do it at a team level, people feel more comfortable than doing it at an individual level. And it's leaning into that discomfort that makes it so that we can have that discussion about the uncomfortable truth, still feel like we belong, and overall performance will go up because clarity is kindness. It's that comfort's not. Discomfort means you're finally getting to that truth. You're doing the work.
yeah, absolutely. Um, so storytelling is often powerful, and and you've given some examples in other scenarios where we've had conversation. Can you share a moment where telling the unfiltered truth, maybe truth that no one wanted to say, completely changed the trajectory for either a leader, a team, or an organization?
I've probably told this story too many times, and I went viral for all of the wrong reasons with this story, but I continued to tell it because I think it's a yeah. Wow. And it's the story of kind of when 2,000 people clapped for bad news. And so the story is that I was with an organization And we were growing rapidly, but we were recognizing that we had some operational challenges that we needed to deal with. And in one of the town halls, the chief executive officer got an inbound question, are we going to do layoffs? And the answer that he shared was no. And those of us in the front row were like, what row? Because we actually were going to lay off a sizable part of the technology team like the week after next. So fast forward, we 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 do the layoffs, and as a executive team, we took all sorts of hits. And so we get to the next town hall, and we you know, I had a good relationship with the CEO. I don't think he actually recognized what was wrong. I think in his mind, he had defined, are we going to do layoffs? He had just gotten done with earnings season. I, you know, everyone was saying we're going to whack 15% of the population. We don't know why. And so in his mind, we're not going to lay people off, just hit a number. And so that's the way he answered it. At least that's the interpretation that I think is the most generous, and I think happens to be true. It was not what anyone heard, though. So I said, okay, I'm going to do the cleanup on aisle 9. You just sit there and look pretty. And whatever I say, just agree with and nod. Please don't step on anything I say. I'm going to try to do this. So I lean in and I say, I'm really glad. So first question comes out in the town hall. What about this? And I say, I am so glad you asked that. Because if you hadn't asked it, I was going to talk about it anyway. And I'm going to lean into discomfort. And I shared a story about the way business operates. And I told the employees that we are always going to be looking to figure out ways to be more productive, that we were always going to be looking for ways to bring in technology to replace human beings, that we would always be looking at our business segments to make sure that we were only investing in those that were going to be profitable, and that we were always going to be looking to do much more less with less as a way of focus and simplification, because we had grown far too complex. And a necessary output of all of those were going to be job losses. And then I wrapped it with, if you ever ask someone this question and they don't tell you what I just told you, they're either lying or they are you're working for a dying company. And you don't want either one of those. So yes, we will be doing layoffs. Yes, we were going to try to help people where you are helping us get to where the business needs to go. I can't guarantee we'll have a home for you, but we're going to work really, really hard. And when everything got done, Jamie, it was crazy. People clapped. They clapped, and they didn't clap because of bad news. Like, I just gave them a big old pile of bad news. They clapped because we were honest with them. And so as we ultimately, the business didn't end well, and we had substantial more layoffs, and those were of not the let's just get better piece. That was we needed to shrink massively to sell the company. But if you looked on LinkedIn, what you saw over and over and over were folks giving the senior leadership team credit for doing what they could. And it was because we were honest. And people, if you give them the truth, even, let me tell you, that was an uncomfortable thing to do. It was very, like, what happens if everyone quits tomorrow? Like, I'm going to lose my job. Okay. But you got to give people the agency and recognize that they have the resilience to handle it. And it's way better than surprising them later and breaking that say-do gap that is so important.
I can just picture you standing in front of the room and, you're to step into that and into that discomfort or risk potentially. You're also just in alignment with your own integrity, right? Like, hey, this is how business works. We're prudently managing this. You want to work for an organization that's actively managing, all aspects of the business. And unfortunately, these are components we have to look at. And I think people really do appreciate that. When you think about building your HR teams, and building that capability, especially when I think about like business partner tracks, right? Um, how do you help your team develop those skills or that confidence to step into that?
Yeah, It is not easy. It's not easy when you're an old guy like me that's been doing this for a while, because every person on the other side of the conversation is hearing something probably for the first time, and 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 you might be in front of 2,000 people, but you're having one-on-one conversations. You're just having them all at once, and so the for me, how do I build that capability in the HR team? It's about setting expectations around outcomes for them. It's around decision rights, like what should you be deciding versus what are you going to give to others, and how do you escalate in the event that the business leader gets to the wrong answer in your view. It is about having a very strong set of operating norms. And, we and every team that I put together, we'll come up with them, we'll debate them, we'll talk about some of them. I'm gonna override because it's my team. I can do that. I always want people to charge the ball instead of wait for the second hop. Meaning, I want people, when you're playing baseball, if you charge the ball, you might make more errors, but you're gonna get more people out and you'll learn more. If you wait for the second hop, you might make fewer errors, but you're gonna not get the guy out as much. I'd rather lean into that learning environment and give people the opportunity to fail in a controlled way. And then you've got to be really, really clear on assuming positive intent. You have to be really, really clear on not signing checks that you don't have the money in your bank account to send out. You got to allow people, I think, to be very purposeful in owning the outcome and having the integrity to say, here's what reality is. Because I think as human capital leaders, maybe you've experienced something different. I don't think we've always done that. We have leaned on risk mitigation. Like that is one of three hats that we need to wear. Like employee advocate's another hat, and that gives you a whole separate answer. A third hat is in the talent maven, like making sure you got the right people in the right spot. All three of those create this tension that allows you to make better decisions in every aspect of human capital. And if you don't give them the opportunity in smaller, revocable ways, like you're never going to be able to do that when you're standing in front of, the entire organization and taking on a really, really challenging topic that has a lot of organizational risk associated with it.
Yeah, I think your analogy of charging towards the ball is also spot on because it's also about being proactive. Like, so in those 3 areas that you're talking about, right, we're not waiting for somebody to, like, make an order, right, or ask the question, right? We're actually scanning and proactively navigating that on behalf of the organization. Um,
Yeah, and as I said in the story, like I was going to talk about whether it came up anyway. Like because I knew everybody else was talking about it.
yeah, and the people they see the executive team in these meeting rooms, you know, and people know things are going on, or they know, like, of course we're going to get asked. And in fact, you want to be asked. It's better that they ask that than them just know or wonder and not say something. Mhm.
But not everyone wants to be asked though. That's the crazy thing. Some people will literally get I have worked around people in my career that had that question not come up and had that conversation not been had, would have taken that as a win. I just fundamentally disagree with it because you're not going to avoid the side conversation on it. You should address it head on because that's what people are counting. They are giving us the trust of spending 10 hours and a lot of emotional and physical energy to help us accomplish some sort of meaningful, noble goal. Like the least you can do is tell them the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. The old study where it was like rats, and if they went to the right, they got zapped. And if they went to the left, they got zapped. And eventually they're all standing still. Like, I think in a lot of our organizations, people are just standing still. And those are the ones who aren't going to ask their question. They're just going to go, okay, you're saying something doesn't make sense. I'm fine with that. That sounds horrible to me.
Yeah, Lencioni had a LinkedIn post, kind of middle of November, I think, that talked about uh, what happens in almost that same situation, and his answer was, "I want to encourage people to be more courageous." I, with all due respect, because like man's a brilliant thinker. I've met him a couple of times. He worked with a couple of teams I've been on. Like I am a huge Patrick Lencioni fan, and if the system is set up to give you anything other than compliance, and you encourage people to run into the system, uh, like you're asking for trouble. I think I may have said that wrong. Let me try that again. If you have a system that is actually set up to drive compliance, encouraging people to to lean into the discomfort and to say the thing behind the thing is actually like that's not going to end well. So there are people out there, and many of them in very senior leadership roles that they don't want to hit things head on because it's hard. And yeah, I just have a different view. I think it is that trust that gets built that enables friction-free relationships, which are one of three things, along with prioritization and alignment around prioritization and capability of talent. Those are the three things that drive performance across almost every aspect of human capital. And if you can't have a relationship with your employees that they trust you, then it's not going to work. And that means telling them uncomfortable truths.
100%. I mean, it's Lencioni's in the five dysfunctions, right? The false alignment, and that's not what we want. All right, here's my last question. If you had every executive in one room and could tell them one uncomfortable truth about leadership that they need to hear right now, what would it be?
How courageous do I need to be in this conversation?
Go for it. We're bold.
We're bold. I think it would be that work is not a safe space; it's a performance space, and we need to treat it as such. What that means is, work is where adults are paid to deliver outcomes, not avoid discomfort. And we weaken companies when we are, protecting comfort instead of standards. And I'm not arguing for a toxic workplace or a mean or a cold one. I'm just not. I'm advocating for an honest one where people know what expectations are. That we don't confuse, safety with comfort. You lean into that discomfort, and that's how we grow. We grow in the gym that way when we're doing, different, bench presses. Like you go home and you're like, okay, I haven't gotten my personal record yet, but I'm sore. That you're leaning into discomfort. You never set a personal record without doing the work and having that discomfort. I think safety at work really means being clear, um, not being immune from expectations. And certainly there are parts of safety at work. You're free from bias, you're free from harassment, you're free from all of the illegal stuff. That's not what I'm talking about. But you can't say that I'm safe and I'm comfortable and those mean the same thing because they don't. Performance requires performance requires discomfort. And so I think it's the takeaway I would leave them with is, the safest teams are the ones with the clearest standards. And you gotta lean into clarity and you lean into radical transparency. And if you do those things well, everything else that's good with what you're trying to accomplish will follow.
That's awesome. Well, I really appreciate you joining us today. I think this topic, seriously, we could keep talking, and hopefully I'll have you back at some point. But it, we're talking about performance. Companies are talking about performance, and you've really hit on how we can unlock that in organizations. And when we think about like sustainability and success, there has to be that growth, which by default means there has to be that discomfort, so we can all grow. Jackson, thank you so much with my deepest appreciation. It's been an honor to have you with us. And I just appreciate you being here.
Absolutely, and look forward to continuing to work with you and all of your ventures as well. It's been a joy to get to know you a little bit over the last few months, and I lift up all the work that you're doing here to have the courageous conversation. So
Thank you so much, Jackson. We'll talk to you soon. And thanks to everyone for listening. You can find out more. Jackson has these kinds of conversations on his own podcast, and you can read them in Substack. I find them inspirational, and hopefully you will too. We'll see you all soon. Thanks so much.
bye now.
Thank you for listening to The Courageous Choice. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star review to help get the word out about the podcast. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our future conversations. If you'd like to know more about gig talent, please visit gigtalentagency.com or email us at podcast@gigtalentagency.com. See you in the next episode.